Going back on the record, the time on the video screen is 11:43 and 32 seconds. Please continue.
Okay. Ms. Edmonds, have you ever reviewed your Wikipedia entry?
Once in a while I do. I don't know when was the last time, but maybe a year ago.
Okay. I mean, do you know, have you ever contributed to it, or do you know people who do contribute to it?
No, I know many people, they take any mainstream media articles or any reports, they put it in there, but no, I haven't contributed.
Have you, when you've looked at it, have you thought that it's generally accurate about the statements that it makes?
Yes, generally yes.
One of the things that it indicates in your biographical information is that you've made certain allegations. Some of them we've talked about a little bit, and I wanted to ask you about some of the others. One of the entries indicates nuclear secrets black market. It says, Edmonds alleges that in the course of her work for the government, she found evidence that the FBI, State Department, and Pentagon had been infiltrated by a Turkish and Israeli-run intelligence network that paid high-ranking officials to steal nuclear weapons secrets. And they have some footnotes for that and some sites. Is that correct that you've made those allegations?
That information is correct, and if I were making it, I would say those are government organizations and others. There's another place missing there. They list the State Department, etc., but there's one other place that's missing.
And what is that place?
That would be RAND Corporation.
And can you tell me about the, give me some more information about the Turkish and Israeli-run intelligence network that is referred to there?
Again, this information has been public, without getting into any methods of intelligence gathering. Yes, through certain U.S. Officials, executively appointed officials, foreign entities, not necessarily or not only government related. So if you say Israel and Turkey, not only government related, but other entities, because it has multi-layers. Their operations, and some of these layers, sometimes they conduct their operations independently and with the sole purpose of obtaining a profit. And therefore, the information they obtain, let's say the nuclear or weapons technology related information, doesn't necessarily only go to Turkey or Israel, but they sell it to the highest bidder. That's how they operate. They contact their people, whether it is in ISI, in Washington, D.C., part of the military attaché for Pakistani intelligence, or the certain Saudi business people in Detroit may be contacted, and they say, okay, I'm talking about these Turkish entities, we have obtained this particular DVD containing this, and this person is willing to pay $500,000, will you offer more? Because if you don't, we will give it to this person. So what I'm trying to say is they do it both for governments, foreign governments, but some of those operatives, they offer it in open market, and they have individuals on their payroll on almost every major nuclear facility in the United States, RAND Corporation, and various in Midwest, various Air Force labs that develop certain weapons technology, which I'm not very familiar with the technology itself.
When you refer to when the article refers to the paid high-ranking American officials, can you identify who they are?
That person has been identified by others, and he has been identified as as Mr. Mark Grossman, who used to work for the State Department.
And Mr. Grossman, I think, is also in your gallery, correct?
Yes.
And I read somewhere that Mr. Grossman had some relationships with a Turkish organization, Turkish diplomats here in the United States.
Yes, he had very, very close relationship with not only Turkish diplomatic communities and entities, but business, and also some of these criminal layer operatives that I told you about. And currently that he's not working, he actually is working for a Turkish company called İhlas Holding.
Okay. Now, was Mr. Grossman the ambassador to Turkey at some point?
Yes.
Okay. And then what was his position at the State Department, if you recall?
He had several different positions. I believe in 1999 or 2000 was European affairs that dealt a lot with NATO. And afterwards, during the early Bush administration's stage, he was the second or the third highest person in the State Department. I'm not sure about the title.
And during that time, I'm sorry, during that time, when he was the second or third highest ranking person at state, I've read somewhere that you've alleged that he actually warned the Turkish embassy about a CIA front company that had been set up to stop proliferation of nuclear weapons.
That will be summer 2001, whatever title he held at that point. Mr. Grossman informed a certain Turkish diplomatic entity who was also an independent operative of a company called Brewster Jennings, because Brewster Jennings was frequenting the American-Turkish Council as a consulting or analyst firm, and there were certain nuclear-related operatives who wanted to hire Brewster Jennings and have it pose as a front company. So there were talks between those Turkish operatives and Brewster Jennings, and Mr. Grossman wanted those people to be warned that Brewster Jennings was a government front for government, and it was a front. It was not a company. It was a front for government, U.S. government, and for those Turkish individuals to be told to stay away from Brewster Jennings. But the person who received that information, the Turkish diplomatic but also operative, actually contacted the Pakistani military attaché and discussed with the person who was there about this fact, and also warned them to stay away from Brewster Jennings.
And now, was this one of the allegations or one of the concerns that you brought to the attention of anybody at any point?
You mean when I was working for the FBI,
Yes.
when I blew the whistle inside the FBI?
Right.
No, I didn't do it inside the FBI, because at that point I didn't know they were covering up this information only after I was fired, and the state secrets privilege was invoked. And knowing what I knew, I went to Congress and discussed it with certain people in Congress. I brought it up with the Inspector General's office inside during a meeting, and at that point I provided them with details in terms of dates and who were those targets, which I can't, the direct targets of them.
And when you say the Inspector General's office, do you mean the DOJ Inspector General?
Correct, I'm sorry, Mr. Glenn Fines, under Glenn Fines' office.
And why would Mr. Grossman, if you know, warn the Turkish government, other people, not to deal with the CIA front company?
There were various relationships and various activities Mr. Grossman was engaged with these individuals, and I don't know which reasons was the top reason for him to do it. Some of them were the monetary relationship, but others dated back to operations that he was leading while he was an ambassador U.S. ambassador in Ankara, in Turkey, up until 1997. And some of these operatives dealt with him, and they were doing certain operations in Central Asia for him. I don't know who he was working for, Mr. Grossman, at the time for these operations. It's hard for me to tell. He was involved in so many different things, and I don't know which one constitutes the biggest reason he was providing this.
Just going back to the Israeli, but we've talked mostly about the Turkish organizations,
Yes.
Turkish government. Are you aware of any either Israeli government or Israeli organizations influencing members of Congress as well?
Not directly. Not directly.
Indirectly?
Indirectly, based on how they work, some of the largest Israeli lobby groups with the entities such as AT and also the Turkish diplomatic community, and how they actually train and make it possible for the Turkish lobby and these entities to do it. They had training period between 96 and 98 from individuals that were sent to them from both AIPAC and JINSA, both on the lobbying but also on covering the money track, covering up the money track.
One of the other entries on your Wikipedia entry indicates that you'd accused Mr. Hastert and members of the U.S. government of, let me make sure I'm reading this correctly. The entry says Edmonds also accuses Dennis Hastert of taking bribes. I think we've talked about that a little bit, correct?
Yes.
And then it says, and high-ranking members of the U.S. government of nuclear secrets to Turkey and Pakistan. Did you allege that high-ranking members of the U.S. government had sold nuclear secrets to Turkey and Pakistan?
They were involved in operations that were obtaining illegally U.S. weapons and nuclear-related technology and sell it to foreign governments and also foreign independent operatives.
Now, one of the other entries indicates, it says 911 for knowledge. And I'll just read it. It says, she claims that the FBI received information in April 2001 from a reliable Iranian intelligence asset that Osama bin Laden was planning attacks on 4 to 5 cities with planes. Some of the people were already in the country, and the attacks would happen in a few months. Did you make that claim?
I took the language specialist, Farsi-speaking language specialist, the senior language specialist from the Iranian division, Farsi division in FBI Washington field office, who worked right next to me, to the 9/11 Commission and Inspector General's office, and he testified on this. He informed me and he showed me this translator, Behruz Sarshar, and there's documents out there that he went to Inspector General's office. He gave them the documents, the translated documents on these Iranians. I was not part of that translation. I was not involved. After I left the FBI, because I was witness to that departments, what they had obtained, I just facilitated Mr. Sarshar's meeting with 9/11 Commission and also with the Glenn Fine, Department of Justice Inspector General's office, and I put him in touch with the members of media. But that's my only involvement with that Iranian case.
Do you believe that that's why the 9/11, the families of the 9/11 victims wanted to get your testimony in connection with their case?
I am not sure, because as far as I knew, it had to do with the government of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Arabian financial institutions. I was not told anything about the Iranian case.
We've talked about some members of Congress having connections with the Turkish government or Turkish organizations. Are there others that you're aware of, other than the ones we've discussed already?
Congressional members?
Congressional members?
Yes.
Can you identify some of them?
Their pictures are on I have pictures included on my website,
Okay.
and they can be identified. There are several there, outside the ones you named.
All right. I looked at the website but didn't recognize some of them. So would you be able to tell me who the other pictures are?
Others have been identified. They're all identified as public information.
Yeah.
Okay. Tom Lantis is one of them. I believe he passed away. And Tom Lantis' office would be not only with the bribe, but also in disclosing highest level protected U.S. intelligence and weapons technology information both to Israel and to Turkey. His office was also involved with that. It was not only bribery, but it was other very serious criminal conduct. The Roy Blunt is there. There's an individual with a question mark there. The reason it's a question mark is I was terminated by April 2002, but this particular congresswoman, these Turkish organizations and operatives, if they can't do it via money, they do via blackmail. So they collect information on sexual lives and other information like that. Mm-hmm. And with this particular congresswoman, between 2000 and until I left, this individual, this congresswoman, is married with children, grown children, but she is bisexual. So they had sent Turkish female agents, and that Turkish female agent worked for Turkish government, and had sexual relationship with this congresswoman in her townhouse actually in this area. And the entire episodes of their sexual conduct was being filmed because the entire house, this congressional woman's house, was bugged. And so they had all that documented to be used for certain things that they wanted to request. But I left, so I don't know whether that congresswoman complied and gave. That's why I couldn't use her name, because her face, because I don't know if she did anything illegal afterwards. But information was being collected for blackmail purposes and her lesbian relationship. And the Turkish entities wanted both congressional related favoritism from her, but also her husband was in a high position in the area, in the state she was elected from. And these Turkish entities ran certain illegal operations, and they wanted her husband's help. But I don't know if she provided them with those. I left. I was terminated.
Can you tell me how you know all of that? Everything you just told me?
I can't discuss the intelligence gathering method by the FBI, but in general terms, when foreign targets among themselves discuss how they were going to achieve certain goals, objectives, and if those communications are collected and recorded, not only that you have communication, but in some cases, the involved field office can send surveillance team to see that actually they implemented. For example, if they say somebody says at 5 o'clock we're going to bug this house, the surveillance team would go and see that, in fact, these people broke it. And so there were various ways and things were collected.
Right. So just to make sure I understand this, the Turkish entities were at least preparing to blackmail this congresswoman.
Correct.
And is this congresswoman still a sitting member of Congress?
Yes.
And why, if you know, they want to blackmail this congresswoman?
I don't know what reasons they had, why they just didn't do money. They needed... I was trained as a language specialist by my agent to find pertinent information. And one of the things that we were taught in the FBI, everyone was taught in the counterintelligence, that the target U.S. persons, whether they are in Congress or executive branch or wherever, first go by foreign entities through what they refer to as hooking period. And it was very common. It's a very common way of trying to find vulnerabilities, and that is sexual, financial, any other kinds of greeds, and it was done a lot. It was being done a lot. And in some cases, certain people from Pentagon would send a list of individuals with access to sensitive data, whether weapons technology or nuclear technology, and this information would include all their sexual preference, how much they owed on their homes, if they have gambling issues. and the State Department, high-level State Department person would provide it to these foreign operatives. And those foreign operatives then would go and hook those Pentagon people, whether they were at RAND or some other Air Force base. And then the hooking period would take sometimes 6 months, sometimes 1 year. They would ask for a small favor. But eventually, after they would do the targets, the U.S. person, some small favors, then they would go blackmail, and then that person would give them everything. Nuclear-related information, weapons-related information, it always worked for them. So it was not always money.
If you know, I mean, what was it that these Turkish entities wanted from this congresswoman?
I know for sure that Armenian genocide was one, but also where she came from, that city, the district where she came from, is where certain Turkish operatives, lobby groups run illegal businesses for fundraising for themselves to generate money. And for laundering that money, they needed her influence in that she is from, and also her husband, because her husband was also involved, had some high-level position, not an elected person, with where she came from. And they had another representative who was making it possible, but supposedly she, at that point, was an obstacle. That's all I know.
In your experience, I mean, was this hooking technique used with other members of Congress by Turkish entities?
Well, when I worked for the FBI, I worked on operations that were not only current, but a specific period of 1996 till 2001 December, 2002 January. So there were a lot of things that a certain field office had provided me to go over, and some of that I didn't complete. But one example would be with regard to Mr. Hastert. For example, he used a townhouse that was not his residence, and for certain not very morally accepted activities. Now, whether that was being used as blackmail, I don't know. But the fact that foreign entities knew about this, in fact, they sometimes participated in some of those not maybe morally well activities in that particular townhouse that was supposed to be an office, not a house, residence, at certain hours, certain days, evenings of the week. So I can't say if that was used as blackmail or not, but certain activities, they were shared, they were known.
With respect to the congresswoman who they were, you don't know what happened ultimately because you left, right? Or you
Correct.
were terminated.
Correct.
But with respect to that congresswoman, you said one of the things that they wanted was, you said Armenian genocide. I assume you were referring to the fact they wanted her support to
Yes.
oppose the Armenian genocide resolution.
Yes. And she was not leaning that way during that stage until this hooking started.
And does it surprise you that they would go to those lengths to gain her opposition to such a resolution?
No, not at all.
Well, why not?
I don't know what their reason is that they are going to this extent. I mean, they may have, I can only guess what their reasons are, but they would do anything. It's a very important issue, and whether it's money, whether it's sexual blackmail, anything they would do to not let this happen or get the support so it wouldn't happen.
Are you aware of, other than the people that we've talked about, and I want to come back to Roy Blunt in a minute, but aside from the people we've talked about, are you aware of other current sitting members of Congress who you believe have been given money by the Turkish lobby, Turkish government, to oppose the Armenian genocide resolution?
Projection, speculation.
You can answer.
The pictures are there, and I just talked about the congressional woman with the question mark because I don't know whether she complied with their, but those are it. Everything that those people are all there at that website, the pictures.
Why is, just before I leave this subject, in your, when we talk about the Armenian genocide, can you just describe what your understanding of that is?
In terms of historically?
Historically, what it is.
It's the genocide that was committed in Turkey against Armenians, and I have read certain documents, historical documents in the past, because this issue I have been aware of for a long time. Everybody in Turkey, they kind of know, but they can't admit they know. Mm-hmm. And it's basically what was available in Turkey was very limited. So my knowledge would be this very, very limited knowledge of what occurred.
Right. So based upon your background, your experience, in your opinion, is the Armenian genocide something that's generally accepted as a historical fact?
In Turkey?
Yeah.
In Turkey, no. I mean, in Turkey, nobody can even say they think about it.
What about elsewhere?
In other
Outside
countries,
of
like
Turkey.
outside Turkey, yes. At least in the circles that I've been, it is seen as something that is accepted and that is known as one of those historical events that have taken place.
Like the Holocaust in World War II. Something that people generally regard as
correct.
Something that happened. Are you aware of anyone, any serious scholars and serious people who dispute that those genocides took place?
Throughout the years, because I used to be on the email list of certain student associations that had international students, so I would get from the Turkish parts of those communities emails from this professor or that professor from Turkey visiting to give that lecture, but I don't even remember their names of those people. Mm-hmm. Is that a question? Did that answer quite your question?
Well, I gather from what you're saying that you would get emails possibly from Turkish organizations, Turkish people, where they would dispute that the Armenian genocide took place?
Absolutely.
Okay. Outside of that group, that cultural group, if you will, are you aware of other objective scholars who dispute that the genocide took place?
No, I'm not.
Why is Roy Blunt in your gallery?
Be one of the individuals who was the recipients of both legally and illegally raised donations, campaign donations from foreign entities.
And what foreign entities?
The ones that I'm aware of, Turkish entities. Yeah. It's just like a network, because those people, they work together, and I don't have expertise in PAC, but there are so many ways that these PAC things can be not very legally distributed from one person's, let's say, Mr. Hester's campaign to that individual, or let's say if it's a foreign registered lobbyist, like Livingston can get foreign money, but then clean it and then give it through him. It's just so many ways. It's a very complicated maze-like network, and how they get this money cleared and into people, into people's pocket, and also their campaign.
And are you familiar with some of those PACs?
No, not really.
Have you ever heard of the Turkish Coalition USA PAC?
No.
So, I mean, you're aware that the PACs exist, but you wouldn't be able to identify any of them?
Correct, not by names. Okay.
Correct. Is it come to your attention that some members of Congress, once they've left Congress, like Dennis Hastert, engage in lobbying for the Turkish government?
Well, Dennis Hastert is known publicly. Stephen Solars is known publicly. He used to be a congressman, and then he became lobbyist as soon as he left, both for Israel and Turkey. Bob Livingston, within a year after he left Congress, he became the paid lobbyist for the government of Turkey, and he's registered under FARA, Foreign Agents Registration Act. But then there are people who work for these lobbying firms who are not the top, but they have received their share while they were working, whether they are in Pentagon. One person was Defense Intelligence Agency person, Dana Bauer. and now she works for Bob Livingston. But this individual, Ms. Bauer, did a lot of favors and illegal favors for government of Turkey and others, and then was hired by Livingston and put on a big salary to represent Turkish government. So it's not only top tier, the lobbying firm, but even the people who work for them later and the various layers of those people.
Okay. What about Richard Gephardt? You know who he is, right?
Yes, I do.
And do you have any information about whether or not he took money from Turkish organizations?
No, I just have current information based on what I read, that he joined a lobby firm that represents Turkey, with the same lobby that Mr. Hastert got hired, but I don't have any information.
You heard of a firm called DLA Piper?
Yes.
Law firm? Are you aware of them lobbying for the Turkish government?
Yes.
Let me give you a hypothetical and just get your understanding of what might be going on, because it's particularly relevant to our case. If you have a hypothetical congresswoman, right, from state X, her district has no Turkish population to speak of or Armenian population to speak of. She's the largest recipient of Turkish PAC money in the 2008 election cycle. Right? She Livingston and Rogers of the Livingston Group, when they're escorting members of the Turkish parliament to a reception. She receives fact sheets from the Livingston Group talking about Turkish relations. Goes to luncheons in honor of the Turkish foreign minister. And she opposes Armenian genocide resolution and, in fact, refuses to even recognize genocide as a historical fact. What's your sense? What does it tell you is going on there?
I object. There's no showing at all that she's got any expertise. It's speculation here. She's asking purely for an opinion. It's totally irrelevant and objectionable.
Based on several that I personally know about in terms of how they conduct and how they behave, those elected officials who are serving the foreign government's interests, I would say that modus operandi that you described is a classic fit of how individuals who happen to owe their and favors to a foreign government, in this particular case Turkey, behave, act, and the kinds of people they associate with. That modus operandi classically matches the individuals I know who were serving Turkish governments and other Turkish entities' interests.
In your view, based on what you know, would it be a reasonable statement to say that that congresswoman is taking money from Turkish interests in part for denying the existence of the Armenian genocide?
Objection, pure speculation.
So based on my knowledge, my experience, and what I know, that money, those Turkish entities, lobby organization will not give a penny to anyone unless they have a prior pact with that person of this is what you're going to do for us, and that has been the case at least until 2002.
In your blog, one of the things that you say, you're referring to your lawsuit, I think, but you say, my case also involves espionage activities by several high-level U.S. officials, both elected and appointed. Have we already talked about, for the most part, what you were referring to there?
Some of it.
What have we not talked about that you're referring to in that portion of your blog?
You want to discuss it off the record?
Sure.
You want to take a break, go off the record?
Go Going off the record, the time on the video screen is 12:18 and 22 seconds.